So I want to apologize ahead of time for the bad quality of the audio. It's really tough to pull the video and audio from Instagram. It's just, yeah, it's terrible. So I apologize ahead of time. But I think listening to this podcast style and just kind of dealing with some of the little cutouts as they're going along is still really worth it. This was a really good in-depth conversation between MFJJ and Ranch Fairy and myself. More the two of them than me. But I really appreciate those guys coming on and talking. I always learn a ton of stuff whenever I talk to each of them. Subscribe to the channel so that I can beat Tim Connor to 50,000 subs. Thank you for the help. I definitely appreciate it. Enjoy. So I've got some questions that people asked. I've got some questions that I've been thinking through. And I think the main reason that we wanted to do this was Troy has lots of people that email him questions about tuning and all manner of, bow stuff. And I feel like his knowledge is much more arrow orientated.
Sure.
And he basically just calls bows kinetic energy devices.
Yeah.
He just seems to not really care about them.
Yeah. Honestly, my goal of this communication is to try to get him to change that.
I think a lot of it. I think a lot of it has to do with where he hunts out of, as well, like where he hunts and what he hunts. Because if you're at 20 yards,
I haven't watched everything he's ever done, but I've watched some of it, and I've obviously gotten a lot of feedback from other people. And I talked to him about this the other day. I was like, I believe he's a traditional guy background, because that's how a traditional guy would tune a bow, right? So when you take the ability to adjust the rest position away, you take the ability to adjust tiller, you take the ability to move a rest left to right, up and down away, because you're just a fixed position, right? You have to move everything with the arrow. You have to manipulate where the knock end leaves. You have to manipulate how stiff the arrow is. You have to manipulate how much front weight there is in it. And that's how you get it to tune with that. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. The reality of it is, if you could start with a fully tuned correct bow and then apply what he's trying to do, it would simply be more efficient. And we can't just gloss over the lack of necessity for tuning a bow. It's really, really, really important. And it's not that hard. And that's my goal as a YouTube person, as much as I did not want to be or intend to be that person, was to try to get everybody to not be afraid to tune their bow, to stop. I mean, I love the pro shop as much as the next guy, and I'm not trying to take business away from them, but I think it's really, really important that people understand how to tune their bow so they can verify that their equipment is working correctly. If you can't verify that, if you're relying on the pro shop to tell you that it's working correctly, you're going to have problems in the long run. It might take a week, it might take a month, it might take a year, it might take 5 years before you really truly see that. But it is really, 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 really important to be able to identify it. And if you can't identify it, you're only going to elevate so far in your ability. And at the end of the day, and I think Troy would really agree with this if we can figure out how to get him on here,
I've invited him 400 times, and then he's asked to join as well. And for some reason, it's just not clicking in. Bitch.
Do you want to try to start it over or something? I don't know if that matters, but I think he would fully agree with, I simply want people to be more effective. And so does he. Like his ideas are basing people to try to be more effective hunters based off of the type of equipment they're trying to use for the application that he's using it for. And that's all fine and good, but there's positions where these things should be applied, and I think that gets glossed over a lot, and I want to try to clarify that a little too. But we need Troy.
I know.
I don't want to mention him. I want to invite him. How the hell do I invite?
Hey! You see, I got the old guy glasses on.
I almost put on the smart guy glasses.
I was clicking every invite you sent me. I was just like, yeah. I mean, it's not a lot of buttons, man. It's just one button right there.
I'm telling you, the man was trying to get you down. All right. So Josh was on a bit of a roll, and I like the idea of establishing this up front. So Troy, what you're trying to do is help people kill more stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I want to understand bows better.
Okay. So what type of questions are you getting that you either feel like you can't answer
or and I have a bunch of stuff that I want to go into on this one. But okay, all right. So why don't you just start off? I'm really curious, like where this is going to go from a yeah, just from your perspective doing it. Go.
Actually, I have questions that I've not been able to resolve that are just my own.
Sure.
And by the way, Josh, I saw your bow reflex and riser length video, and I checked mine, and mine apparently is exactly what you said to do. So that's good. It's an elite remedy. So I've measured it and did all the stuff, and stable.
Very
stable.
Yeah. But a lot of elite designs is around that. Like I like a lot of the geometry and engineering that they use.
I looked at that video on how you measure the geometry, and I now understand torque a lot better. At least I've had a couple of bows that I literally couldn't shoot.
Yeah,
like, it was just horrible. My son could shoot them, but I couldn't shoot them. Weird.
In engineering and design of that simply makes things easier to use or harder to use. It doesn't mean they don't. It's just you have to be way more consistent with your hand position and how you to be accurate.
So I get that a lot on. That's probably the first thing when people start trying to shoot a bear shaft at 7 yards. The first thing, if I have a request back, they're close. Let's say they're within half an inch. They're getting, and you don't know the shooter skill.
Sure.
You don't know the conditions.
Sure.
You don't. Yeah, sure as hell don't have the bow in your hands, right? So I'm doing my best, and I can't tell you once I've had somebody explain that torque thing to me, how many people I've said, "Hey man, just mess with your grip," and all of a sudden I see,
right?
I would have, and I tell them, "Hey, you better practice. Like you better keep those bear shafts around." Is that good advice? I mean, should they shoot those things to get that grip right, or just don't worry about it?
I don't think that's bad advice by any means. I've got another video that I did a while ago. I can't remember what it's called, but it was how to
I've got a lot of those.
And it's all about hand position. And how to hold it correct so it duplicates, because at the end of the day, that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the bow to do the same thing every time. If you could not be involved at all, it would work better in general.
Shooters are great.
Yeah, it solves the problem. And shooting with a shaft does show you your mistakes. It's just way more sensitive. When someone's trying to figure out how to hold their bow, I'll frequently have them stand in front of a paper tuner and shoot it over and over and over, which is kind of the thing with less risk of damage to an arrow. Because if somebody torques really bad on a shaft, you can hit the arrow side, break the arrow. If you're torquing little bits through paper, you'll still see it, and you go down and pull your arrow out from 7 yards, 8 yards, 9 yards. You can do it at 10 feet. Just have it leaves the bow. If you're changing your hand position, you'll see a tear in there. I think Dan made a clip or something once of me explaining how to tell what paper's doing with your hand grip. I never made a video about it. I'll make a better breakdown one. I have more flexibility in my schedule this year, so I'm hoping to put out a lot more videos that are more around form and tuning and technique, a little less equipment, although there's so much.
How far do you recommend paper tuning? I've always just said about 6 or 7 yards. I just
paper tune at 7 to 10 feet, like the Easton manual says.
Okay.
Paper tuning for me is just a starting point.
Yep.
It's not a fun. It's where am I orientating these things? Now, unlike probably most shops that most guys will go in, I don't typically move the arrow rest at all. Like I said,
I don't recommend doing that either.
Yeah, because you're covering up what's really going on. Yeah. But the difference between trying to manipulate your arrow to fix those things, as opposed to manipulate your wheel system to fix those things. When you start your wheels left to right, or applying pressure in certain spots on it, whether it be at the cable guard or a limb bolt, you're changing the dynamic of what that's doing. In essence, you're trying to get the back end of the arrow and the front end of the arrow to be in a line before you let go of it.
Yeah, I tell people it's like shooting pool.
Yeah, it's just trying to make a straight line.
It is just like shooting pool, and if your arm's over here, it's going that way.
Well, but here's the problem. How do you check that, right? Because you can only check that at full draw. Well, there's not really equipment to do that with. Like what it looks like at rest and what it looks like at full draw are completely different.
Yeah, I've noticed
there's a
that
based off of full.
Yeah, but you see the effect through paper at what Josh is talking about when you're at 6 feet, because the arrow hasn't taken over yet. So like if you're paper tuning further away, especially if you're shooting a fletched arrow, it's had time to correct a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It has a chance to correct itself. If it leaves the bow at 7 to 10 feet, whether there's fletching on it or not, it still shows what it's initially doing. Once you start getting past that, if you have fletching, the fletching has had an opportunity to try to correct it, or it's being knocked left to knock right because it's corrected and reacted, because it does that when it's not square, as I'm sure by shaft tuning and stuff and cutting things down to get rid of that. It'll kick back and forth as it goes. Especially if things are orientated incorrectly in the cams, like the cams are leaning really bad or the cables are out of time. It changes all those things, which is why I think the right philosophy here, to be honest, is to get the wheels orientated correctly and the bow timed correctly and the knock height correct and the rest position correct. If you ever try to entertain the path of what you're going down, which I think there's some real validity to what you're doing. And I learned it when I was a kid, when I was shooting traditional bows and how to try traditional bow, because you adjust any of those things.
That's right.
So my dad taught it to me when I was little, was changing your arrow spine, changing the length of your arrow, what makes an arrow stiffer, what makes an arrow weaker, how you change those things. And that really does work 100%. But if you haven't tuned your bow first, you're leaving a good amount of energy transfer on the table. Right, because if everything's not traveling in a straight line, it's a what'd you call it? What's the word you like to use to describe a bow? It's a
kinetic energy
machine, an inefficient kinetic energy machine.
There's no reduction. There's no reduction in KE though.
Huh?
How much speed loss do you get if the bow's a little out of whack?
I've never actually tried to test.
Well, you probably ought to do that. It's an interesting test.
I will put it on the list.
That is an interesting.
No.
It's
very simple. If the velocity never changes and it's out of whack, the kinetic energy never changes. However, the arrow is flying sideways.
But that's the issue.
So
issue is the actual. So if we're talking, obviously we're talking kinetic energy. But then if the impact of the arrow is sideways on an animal.
No, that aside.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's just a kinetic energy machine. You need to get the hell over it. It's a spring. They only launch and they only have a certain amount of kinetic energy. And it's hard to grasp.
Hold on.
It doesn't change.
Call it a spring, right? So if your spring is mounted in a straight fashion versus in an angled fashion, is it going to pressure?
Arrow flight, we're not talking about. I'm just saying from a kinetic energy standpoint, I think if you take it out of whack, you're not going to see any difference in the velocity. That's massive. You may see 2 or 3 feet per second. You're not going to see 20.
For sure.
I can tell her that if you have an inappropriately spined arrow and an appropriately spined arrow that weigh the same, you can see up to 10 feet of variance, because I have tested.
Well, sure. No. That's a totally different subject. But it's
out of the boat.
If you stay with the same platform, the kinetic energy never changes. If the underspined arrow shot.
This, as Aaron from Kafaru would say, this is some pick and fly shit out of chili type of talk right here. So because what we're actually talking about is what's effective for killing stuff,
that's why
right?
I say it's just a kinetic energy machine.
Okay,
I wanted to clear that up.
But we all agree that it would be better for the knock to follow the 100% point out of the bow, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it can be out of whack and it's just a kinetic energy machine. There's too many people who think they can change the kinetic energy.
They think that they can change the KE by going lighter, or just okay. I mean, I think that we're all on the same page here so far.
No. The arrow's got to be flying straight.
Okay. All right. But you've always said that. Like I've never heard you say like the arrow doesn't have. I've never heard you say that. Like, what I wonder is this is what I wonder. I wonder do guys buy your kit and then get home and their top cam is hitting a half an inch behind their bottom cam because they haven't changed their strings in 7 years and their D loop is just all frayed and tore up. And what they start with is, I can fix that by buying the arrow setup. And
I've even got 2 videos on that. So what happens typically is somebody will say, hey, I got the kit and here's my tears. Generally, if the bow's out of whack, they all do the same thing.
What do they do? That I'm interested.
They tear one way.
Okay. But that means the guy is shooting consistently.
Right.
He's shooting consistent, and the bow is doing the exact same thing every time.
Whack it. They're out of time. So out of time will generally, I think, will be high generally. I generally see for some reason. No.
Depends on which way it's out of time.
It won't skip off the rest.
Will change based off of which cam's flipping over. Now, a lot of times if it's drastic,
I'll be writing that down.
You'll end up getting contact on the rest as it leaves, and then it's out and look like it's not. There's a small percentage of movement down for a knock low tear before it goes away and becomes knock high again, but it's knock high because it's contact. It's actually hitting something, which you can verify by athlete's foot powdering, your launcher,
sure, lipstick, whatever.
Yeah. But you've only got about, where's the camera on this thing? Here we go. You only got about that much movement down before you're going to actually start hitting the rest. So you'll frequently see a knock high tear when it's actually low. Just to clarify that. And if you're moving your one cam orientation forward over the other, it will absolutely change up and down, which is why those have to be dead even to get a true setting. That's really important. It's got to be dead even. Your cams have to point straight at each other at full draw, not at rest. It doesn't matter what they look like at rest. It only matters what they look like at draw. And they have to be square for that kinetic energy machine to send that kinetic energy in a straight fashion and not directed at an angle. And when you're stretching it at an angle, then you're manipulating your arrow spine or stiffness or tip weight to try to force it around that inadequate thing. Just like a recurve or a longbow, they're not straight. They're recessed over. So your arrow has to bend around it in a straight fashion. And that's where you find that sweet spot that you're talking about, where it just goes, whoo, it just shoots straight. It's because it's bent around an unevenness with the right amount of pressure matching tip weight and spine to end up those 2 points or nodes are in a straight line with each other.
Right.
A modern compound allows you to be able to manipulate those things so they're in a perfect straight line to begin with and not manipulating around it. That allows you to do way more arrows looking straight. So once you get those things perfect, you'll find multiple different configurations that all of a sudden work, whereas before one worked. Well, that's why.
It's not
because you're not trying.
Not uncommon for somebody to shoot one of the kits and get 3 different combinations that shoot bullet holes.
Yeah, your bow's
300 spine with a lighter point, and then the 250 or whatever with a stiffer point, and then a few of them tear kind of wonky, right?
Yes.
They'll literally send me pictures of tears, and they got a circle. I'm like, well, pick your poison, right? And I don't always say, oh yeah, shoot that 700 grainer. I don't care, but I know they've got 3 arrows to pick from, and I know that they figured it out, and it's at least the launch conditions are super good, and they got 3 choices. Quite frankly, I sell and help sell. When people ask me what weight to shoot, I probably sell 70% of broadheads are 150 or 125s. That's just where people are comfortable. And it's the broadest range of broadheads, right? It's the easiest thing. You can go buy whatever.
You've got options.
Yeah, a ton of them, right? A ton of great heads out there that are in that weight class, and you can get them anywhere. And then also, if you wander off in the woods like I've got the tough head, and I end up in goddamn Colorado and my arrows break, car wreck, God knows what, run over them. I've been prone to run over a few things. I'm not going to go find 300 grain tough heads laying around in a shop, but I could roll into Bass Pro and get a Magnus or something like that. So for guys who travel a lot and that kind of thing, that's been probably the most revealing thing. Before I designed the test kit, somebody showed me that. I was shooting with him, and then another guy I know, and he was making different arrows, and he was just manipulating the arrow, and 3 or 4 of them flew, and I was like, what? Like, come on, brother. And I did it, and I was like, we're standing here in the garage, like, people could do that. At least they would take the effort to take the next step to try to get their arrows to fly perfect. Because I spent, I'm 54, I've been shooting a bow since I was 14. I'm pre-carbon, right?
Sure, me too.
BC.
Yeah, I was 4 and I'm 44, so I got 40 years. So everything was aluminum.
I've shot a lot of bad arrows. Yeah. I've wounded a lot of crap to death. Just, that arrow shoots really good. I don't know why, but it's number 1, right? So and it's wild. How do you start off if I walked into your shop and didn't know what the hell I was doing and just said, I want to become a bow hunter, seen you on YouTube, blah, 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 happen to live down the street or whatever. How do you determine what arrow I'm going to shoot?
What do you want to
if I don't know?
do? The first thing I'm going to ask you is, what kind of hunting do you want to do?
This, I want to dive into this way deeper, because I also want to know what you'll allow them to leave the shop with. Like if they're shooting it, let's say they walk in, new guy goes, I got $3,000.
Yeah.
So I want creme de la creme. I want the whole setup. And he says, Troy, you pick the animal. I'm assuming we should probably do something simple like whitetail.
If I'm
whitetail,
out
30
west,
yards.
I'm gonna have them build an elk arrow, and then you can always scale down from there. You can shoot a damn whitetail with an elk arrow.
Okay. All right. All right. Everybody, there's elk son. Hold fast archery says elk son. Okay. So let's go with elk. This will be fun.
Okay. So, but it's not just going to be what kind of animal you're hunting. Is how are you hunting? Are you running and gunning, calling, bugling, and how far do you want to be able to shoot?
60
in the
yards. I want to shoot 60 yards because I feel like I can possibly do that. And
so
I'm running gun guy.
Okay. And how many pounds are you going to shoot?
I don't know. But
never
I'm a strapping
shot
young
a
man.
bow.
I'm a strapping young. I don't have a bow, but I can bench press 47 pounds. So I'm really strong. You know, I mean, let's say 65 pounds. I'm 28 and a half. Okay. Let's just go with what I am right now. I'm 65 because it's comfortable, and I'm 28 and a half inches. I pulled my buddy's bow that was 65 pounds. It was fine. How's that?
Sure. Okay. So if we're just talking about arrows in this equation, and you're spending $3,000, so you're probably not buying something that's on the low end of velocity. It should have good energy, good efficiency in general. You're going to be a 425 to 475 grain arrow with a tip not heavier than 125, so you can still get a variety of options in the future. Unless you've been asking for something different, totally fine. And in that scenario, there's lots of fixed blade broadheads I would recommend, but there's only a couple of mechanicals I would ever even recommend. My mechanical broadhead requirements for elk are 1.5 inch cutting diameter or smaller, preferably 2-blade if you're going to use mechanical. The Fatal Steel Grim Reaper's got a 1 3/8 3. If you want to shoot a 3, that one's really good. There's only about 3 or 4 mechanicals I even recommend. And then it's going to be a fixed blade broadhead, period. Micro Hades Pros are really popular
Brandon,
for us because they're all.
Remember when I told you I'd break the blades off the sever?
Yep.
I
bet you Sever's on
right there.
Yeah, and I bet you Sever's on his list for an elk
snap them off.
an elk head too.
Yeah.
Give me 1 inch wide.
That's funny.
You're not going to find much under 1.5 inches in a 2-blade, but I typically go over 1.5 inches, period. Like I just won't. Not for that big of an animal. It's just not smart. But then it'll really boil down to the type of construction. What's more important to you? Do you want a better blood trail, or do you want better penetration? Which one?
I want to shoot through all the way through.
You want to shoot all the way through them? Then you're going to use a 2-blade single bevel, 125 grain. Preferably steel construction. You're not going to find as many in that weight. That's the problem. So good single bevel steel broadheads, because I don't like aluminum, period. I try to talk people out of anything aluminum. Steel or titanium only, single bevel, and you end up going up to like 150 or 175 to try to find those things. But I'm still going to try to keep you in that 425 to 475 range because of velocity and drop. And there's so much to do at distance. Like if you're like the really heavy stuff that I guess you're probably shouldn't say that you're known for. It's probably that gets more associated to you.
No, that's what I'm known for.
Because you're not
absolutely. You don't have to sugarcoat it.
You're not just doing that. It gets like really like push that this is it, and I don't think that's really what you're doing. Personally, I don't. I
sell a lot of 525 to 550 grain arrows. I tell you that, probably 85% of them.
Which, if all you're doing is shooting out of a tree stand and ground blind inside of 40 yards, if a guy said that's what he's doing, I would probably emphasize, hey, go a little heavier. It's not going to hurt anything. There's not much of a loss of reaction time at that distance, and the drop isn't so bad that it's not that big of a deal. I always pass through everything I shoot at. So personally, I don't ever shoot that heavy because I keep getting pass-throughs. And I've shot, in my life, I've probably shot 50 big game animals of different varieties, deer, elk, bear, sort of thing. I've shot a lot of animals. I've always gotten pass-throughs, but I don't shoot big cutting diameter broadheads. So that's really what I would lean toward. But the question I wanted to ask Troy is, out of this whole equation, right? Not just the arrow, but the arrow and the broadhead. what percentage of the importance of this do you place on the broadhead of penetration?
Well, if you're talking to Troy and not the customer, then
Yes.
it is it's the last thing everyone thinks about and the first thing that hits the animal. So
Sure.
you need to have something that will not bend or break, or in something that's very overlooked is dulling on impact.
Yeah. I agree.
It's completely unaddressed. It's irresponsible in the bow hunting community. How much erosion happens to the blade edges on impact.
And you've got a lot of really good sharpening videos on your channel.
That's why I started doing them, because I started to see it. You hit them right with a right broadhead that doesn't dull. You don't have to wait. You back the video.
So I think what
it's
Josh,
in the pocket. Go get them.
What Josh is going for is broadhead, FOC, total arrow weight. What I think he's wondering is what
percentage of importance do you place on the broadhead over the FOC over the total weight arrow? If you had to break it down,
the broadhead comes first.
80%. This is 10%. This is 5%, or whatever.
90% is the broadhead. If it fails, it's Ed's first rule.
I know. That's exactly.
Can't break or bend.
Exact same thing I say. It's 90% broadhead.
Yep.
So why are we talking about heavy arrows so much if it's 90% the broadhead?
Because when you hit something hard and you're not as good a shot as you are, then the shit hits the fan.
But isn't the broadhead 90% of that still? No. You don't think that?
No, I don't. I think it. I've intentionally shot a lot of pigs in the wrong place with light arrow systems and had them bonk like crazy.
Yeah, Troy, your new Magnus video, the one that you guys just did, shooting that like more kudu style point, that was really interesting, because you said the biggest reason that you think that arrow didn't go all the way through after destroying that front leg was because he was light.
It went humorous.
So it wasn't
it went humorous to humorous.
Yeah.
But so it cut the shoulder blade. It cut the shoulder blade smooth off the necropsies next week, which I of course get punished by YouTube for doing. But it's incredible. There's 7 bone fragments that blew apart from the humerus that are in the meat. The scapula's completely detached from the humerus, and then it hit the other humerus.
So Troy, your worst case scenario is arrow hits, but your worst case scenario is arrow hits bone, right? Where I am right now with whitetail, my worst case scenario is arrow hits guts and deer travels really far.
You miss that far?
I don't generally.
So hang on. Okay, that was a little cheap, but
Troy, if you
are they spinning or what? Why do you think why would you think they would go into the guts?
All right, Josh, what did you want to say? Josh,
you hit that animal in the shoulder, like you're right through the socket or whatever this place was. Humerus. I actually, before we got on here, because I wanted to feel fresh about what you were doing. But if you hit there in the humerus, you missed where you should be aiming by just as much as hitting it in the guts the other direction.
No. I aim. Caleb missed by an inch.
Okay, but average, in all fairness, average human being, safe shot placement of the vitals, you want to be in the middle of the lungs, right? Because you're trying to get both lungs.
You're about 5 inches back of the most lethal part of the animal physiologically.
Say that again. I didn't quite hear you. Sorry.
So, middle of the lungs. Let's say, how far back behind the crease are you talking about?
I would say on the average, it depends on the size of the animal, obviously, but if you're hitting the middle of the lungs, you're good 3 inches back, 2.5 inches back from the crease. So
you're 5 inches.
You're
5 inches back from the most lethal physiologic impact point on any animal on the planet, elephant to mouse. So I don't shoot there.
So
you shoot for the top of the heart.
Okay, fair, but you're also choosing a much smaller target. Wouldn't you agree with that?
No, on a deer, it's about the size of straight up the leg and right above the elbow. That hole's about softball in the third. I mean, big target.
You talked about that V. Troy has a pretty interesting video where he uses like rubber hoses and all this kind of stuff to show basically the heart and then the interaction with all the arteries in the lungs and then where that sits within the animal. And I've thought a lot about this because I went heavy arrow and fixed blade broadhead, the whole thing, and I've backed back down. And what I have done is, instead of shooting for that vital V that you talk about, I've done what Josh talks about, which is tending back from the crease.
And you should with a mechanical broadhead.
Right.
You should. Yeah.
But
100%.
what I've found is that over the last 3 years since I've been doing this, that I've recovered more animals and I've lost less by using, and this is a super blanket statement, and it is not, this is the problem. It's not scientific at all. It's anecdotal for me. Is I have recovered more animals by shooting behind the crease 3 inches with a larger mechanical and a faster arrow. Now, my stuff is dialed in. Like when I'm doing it, it's going straight. Its nock is following tip. And, you know, like I sent you the picture the other day of that huge Grim Reaper that didn't do full penetration at all. And that was on just a white Tennessee doe. Poked out the far side a little bit, but she was dead as a damn doornail, obviously.
Sure.
Of course. But that's anecdotal. But I feel like what we're talking about here is, what is the worst case scenario? Like
bone's the worst case scenario for every bow hunter on the planet. We have a low energy projectile. I mean, it just doesn't have, it's not a bullet. Like, it's just the exponential increase in energy for bullets it's unfathomable. Like, I mean, it's incredible actually. So bone impact is the worst thing that could possibly happen to you.
So
yeah,
that's
Josh,
the case. Why do you not think it's wiser to move away from the bone but still hit a high lethality area?
Because the target that on an elk, the vital V is almost the size of a basketball. No shoulder blade. It's rib cage. The humerus goes like this, the scapula goes like that, and the leg is here. Yeah. And the scapula is not like this. It's way more vertical than everybody thinks. And then from a tree stand or something, as far back as you're talking about, God, you start getting a little 1/4 and 2 and stuff. You start messing with the guts. I mean,
talking broadside quartering away, which is typically the shot I try to take because it's the highest likelihood of success. Typically, I rarely ever shoot something quartering away. I did shoot my my bull elk this December, eight thing towards me, and I put it on there, and I hit the crease and passed with a 1 3/8 fatal steel with a, you'll hate this, 400 grain arrow.
I don't care what you're doing. I'm trying to, so this is where the thing, we talked about this on the last one with James. There are some people who can really shoot and get a chance to shoot a lot. I was not a very good shot on game, but now having hundreds of them behind me, the reason why I do the deer, everybody says I'm hunting. I turned my branch into a test lab. I'm the only person on YouTube, probably on earth, shooting different platforms, different broadheads, different arrow systems, intentionally in a hunting situation at the most common hunting distance, which is whitetails. 90% of the Western guys are it's a small microcosm of, it seems big to the Western guys, but it's not. The bow hunting world is all whitetails. So I said, hey, I have a completely legal 365, 24/7, no laws, no rules. You don't even need a license to come hunt here to shoot pigs. Shoot them in the dark, and you can just plunk away at them and see what happens. And so I did. I can tell you this, if I back them up to 30, you start losing them. You can't hit them. You cannot hit them square. They move so much. I pulled all my deer feeders inside of 20, and it really helped.
Here's a little contradictory to some of what you're saying, and some of why I don't push people that heavy is the reaction time is more with what you're shooting. Like you add 100, 150, 200 grains to your arrow, you're losing massive amount of velocities. And we put out a couple of
videos on that too, and I can't.
The different speed.
Of all the clips I've been sent, the reaction times are all over the place.
So I'll have to find it for you, but I had a guy who reached out to me that had done a whole bunch of testing and actually gave anecdotal, actual numbers and graphing and whatnot to it that I haven't published anywhere yet, but it was pretty incredible. And I'm trying to remember the exact numbers, but it was around, and it was at 30 yards that he was trying to test it.
Yeah.
That the difference between like a 425 to 450 grain setup versus like a 650 grain setup.
Was he shooting animals, or was he shooting targets and timing them?
Well, so you can time from when the bow goes off till the arrow strikes, if you got it on film. And you can go back frame by frame. I don't do your own editing or anything like that, but you can see exactly how long to the nanosecond.
Grant Woods did a video on that too, where they dropped something.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the flaw. You're shooting at a constant moving. The target is constant.
Sure.
So it gives great results. Guess what? The animals aren't. So I did a video on this where I showed guys shooting whitetails that didn't move, jumped completely out of the way, and
sure,
none of the arrows were big, heavy stuff. Most of them were faster than what I talk about, right?
Sure.
And then some rolled, some spun, and the worst one is when they do that, when they just when they sweep away.
Yeah.
You want to talk about sucking the energy out of your arrow. I mean, you're hitting a moving target. So it's going straight, and then it hits something and just pulls it to the side. And the pigs are terrible. I've had them shoot forward and all kind of stuff.
We're going down a path that you and we have gone down many times before. And I think that this is the crux of this, is that you feel like the worst case scenario is something that a lot of these other guys don't feel like is the worst case scenario. So I think you feel like bone is the worst case scenario. And I think that a lot of I've watched tons of your stuff and tons of everybody's stuff around this, because I'm so curious, because you're really smart and a respiratory therapist, and with all your testing and all your knowledge, I just think that you feel like the worst case scenario is one thing, and a lot of the archery community feels like it's a different thing. And
what do you think? What do they think it is?
Airballing an animal, that you should just cheat away from the bone, like that you shouldn't be shooting as close to that, because I think that they think if you can shoot. Josh, go ahead. You know this better than I do, probably.
Here right now, I've been selling bows and working on bows for a large community for 30 years. The number one thing, I get so many hunting stories every year, it gets really old. You wouldn't think it would get old after.
No, I can only imagine, bro.
The number one failure point is the animal moved before my arrow got there. Number one by far. I hit somewhere else because it was moving when I shot. So the number one way to reduce that, in my mind, is to speed up the arrow. They have less time to get out of the way. They have less time to react, and you're more likely to hit closer to where you were aiming. And out of all the years, that is hands down the number one. And I've seen it so many times, it's crazy. And that
results in a lot of high hits too when they hit them. Yeah, it's hard to track the high hits. They're hard to get,
Sure, but we can at least agree that if you're using a slower arrow, you're going to miss by a greater margin because the animal has more time to move. If the animal happened to move when you shot, fair?
That assumes the animals are all consistent.
No, it assumes motion.
It's motion.
I mean, that's like
being the exact same for both applications, right? I shoot 100, you shoot a 600, same animal moves, same direction, everything. You're going to miss by farther than me.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing I've seen and heard by far the most over time. And that's part of where I struggle with the really heavy thing, because I feel like that gets glossed over a little bit. I've seen a lot of things. Well, it's only this much time difference. Well, that much time difference on a whitetail is a lot, because it's moving a lot when it moves. And they all move. Rare that one doesn't at least flinch a little bit when it hears something, and it's going to hear something. Now, the other argument is the bow's a little louder, so maybe that makes them react a little more.
I honestly don't think the bows are the problem on that scenario.
Okay.
I actually think the bow tips them off, and they hear something hissing. I think the arrow sounds like a helicopter to them.
Oh, I agree. And the type of fletchings you use and whatnot make a really
I don't think you can fix it. I think that they live, if you sit out in the woods and in your tree and you're in a place where it's pretty quiet, like not suburbia or, you know, a lot of us get to hunt in suburban areas. Like I went from ranch 15 minutes from here, and you hear kids screaming in cars and helicopters and crap all the time. But when you get out west and it's freaking quiet, they live like that 365 days a year. They don't yell at each other. There's no TV. There's no Instagram live with a bunch of idiots trying to figure out something that's never going to be fixed, right? There's none of that. It's just quiet. And I don't think we understand how loud that sound coming at an animal that gets hunted is. I think it sounds like a helicopter going off to them because they're constantly being bothered, right? Something's trying to eat them. They're on the menu all night. They don't get to go inside, right? I can't decide. I wish I was a deer so I could ask them, but I think they hear the bow and it's weird because I've talked around them a lot and stuff, right? On camera, like they're right there and I'm talking like pretty loud with the hunting public guys. They just talk and the deer just keep being deer. It's weird, but I think they hear something weird and then they hear that hiss coming, and I think it's so much louder to us. I've had whole packs of pigs on video, not the one I'm shooting at. I've had 6 of them. They all roll.
They all react.
I'm 10 yards away, rolling out of the way.
Yeah.
It's wild. I'll get back on, Brandon. I'll get back on track.
Well, you know how it is. I just feel like we've been down this road before.
No. I have great questions. I think I have great questions.
Go for it. Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm back in the shop with you, and we've tuned and we've shot for an hour. You know, you've got my form solid, and you've messed with the bow because I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And we got whatever you've told me to shoot.
You're doing this, whatever the hell this is.
Whatever that is.
Yep.
My 400th shot. Do you tune the bow with one arrow, or do you have them shoot all of them through paper to check them all that they're launching correctly?
Oh, do we have people knock tune?
Well,
Is that what you mean?
The whole set though. Like, do you tell them, hey, okay, well that's the first arrow, but you've got to check all of them?
So typically, in my experience, if you rotate your nocks, you'll eliminate any of the little.
I don't know about that though. Like I'm the new guy, right? So would you tell me to
tell you that? Yeah, that you. But the one thing I did learn last year that kind of surprised me is I knock tune stuff to try to get every bolt hole look the same. And then as soon as I fleshed them, they didn't anymore, and I had to go through and retune it with that weight on the back. So I stopped doing that, and I will shoot a fletched arrow through paper, period, and if it doesn't orientate, tune it till it orientates. And then if the fletchings don't line up the way I want them to, part of why I use all the same color fletch, so I can say which one's my cock feather. If I want to, I will then refletch it and try it again once I've got the orientation point where it wants to seem to shoot a clean tear. But that's so much time that it's not really feasible to stand there with somebody else and help them do it. It's more, hey, shoot your bow for a month. When you're ready to start really tuning for broadheads, this is how you do it. Show you how to make the changes, but you're going to do it over and over and over.
That's been one of the things that's been encouraging. I've been surprised how much effort people will put out. I thought the test kit thing would just be nothing. We sell a lot of them. Like I get a lot of people who really put in. I mean, I'm talking about corresponding for days with people trying to help them. You're getting there. You're getting there. You're getting there. They keep messing around, turning the knocks and all that good stuff. So, but I found this is year 6 for me on YouTube, and 2 years before that, I was trying to figure all this stuff out, just shooting whatever arrows I could get my hands on. No idea what I was doing. Staying in the backyard, breaking a bunch of crap. And it was amazing when I finally built a dozen arrows, and I got them all knock tuned. They all flew good, and then I'll flesh them up. And then they'll shoot just about anything.
Yeah.
They really will when the launch conditions across the whole set match.
Oh, sure.
So
it's
bow and tune, go to the shop. I got a great shop here, Archery Country in Austin. Those guys are freaking phenomenal.
They're good.
And they help me a lot, and they get everything squared up for me and shooting right and tune it. And I have a remedy now. So it's got the cheater bar on it. Get the old torque wrenches out and get the Allen wrenches out and make it fly. Right. So, it's been impressive to see how much effort people are willing to put out across the set. But I think it's a point that needs to be made for everybody listening. If you tune your bow with one arrow, just check them all. Instead of just shooting reps, just fly them. Shoot them through paper and see what happens. I mean, why not?
Right? Yeah, for sure you should. Yeah, but not at the shop.
No,
you shouldn't ask the shop to
you
go
shouldn't
through
be
a
standing
dozen.
there
For sure.
asking the shop guy to spend an hour and a half with you doing that. You're a grown person. You can get a piece of paper and whatever, and cut a box out and put a piece of paper in it and do it
exactly. Yeah,
paper will show you a ton of stuff, and it'll teach you a ton of stuff. It's a very effective.
Absolutely.
Glossed over a lot. Like, it's important.
That's why I asked you about the bear shaft. I've had a lot of people come back to me and say, hey, I keep my bear shaft and I shoot it a lot, like 6 or 8 times a day, just to check my hand position.
Mm-hmm. You'll see
it's just random messages that come in. So those are people who are really putting out a lot of effort. It's good to see. It's really good to see.
For sure.
So I have a question from my younger days.
Okay.
Had me the old Matthew switchback, which I should have kept them.
Yep.
Because those damn things will shoot anything. I gave them to my nephews.
Yep.
And at that time, I really, really didn't have a clue. I don't know that I know anything now, but I'm trying. I was shooting a 70-pound bow, 28.5 inches, and I was given a 400 spine arrow.
Go through the specs one more time, Troy.
28.5 inch switchback.
Okay.
70 pounds.
Yep.
400 spine arrow.
Yeah, it's under spine.
I get a lot of people on my messages that are shooting that.
Well, if you look at a chart, it'll probably tell you to be really close to that. And for the longest time, that was really common. And it started with Gold Tip coming out with their Hunter XT as the first carbon arrow. And they called it a 55-75. And it was
I broke a lot of those.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, the average consumer picks that up and goes, well, I can shoot this up to 75 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So it says on the side of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, everybody was using a 400 spine arrow. That configuration, that bow, you should totally be a 340. Today's world, you absolutely, like a modern bow compared to that one, should absolutely be at least a 340 because the amount of energy that is stored in a cam and a limb today is way, way more than that bow ever put out. Like, that bow was very smooth, easy to shoot.
Yeah. The dual cam stuff is super fast now. Should not be shooting a 400 spine arrow, but a lot of people are doing it. So could you tune the bow to shoot that arrow today?
I probably still could. It would just be more finicky, that bow.
But what does finicky mean, though?
More, your hand torque variance would be greater, your impact variance would be greater because it's not really the right spined arrow. If you tried to shaft tune that, you'd have a hard time.
Yeah,
like
bear shaft would be hard.
Shaft.
Do you think it would fly a fixed blade broadhead if you did your tuning process?
Yeah, I sold those bows. I sold a lot of those bows. And
no. I'm talking about my bow, like a modern bow, not the switchback. The switchback would just about shoot.
What bow are you?
Paper straw.
They were great. I don't think you'd get a 400 to work out of it. Now, if we're talking a 28.5 inch draw length, you let me cut your arrow back to 26.5 if you can clear your launcher, maybe.
Yeah, you're making 350 out of it. Sure.
Right, you'd have to shoot a 100 grain tip and almost no insert, and now your projectile that you built's like got a 10% FOC and it weighs like 400 grains. Right, that's not. You can get away with lighter arrows as long as you're not sacrificing that front weight. So when it hits something hard, it's being led by the front still. It's not being eaten by the shaft. So, yeah, at today's bow, no. I mean, could I get it to shoot? Yeah. Could I get it to shaft tune? Probably not. Might be. And it depends on how much weight you're making me put in the front of that arrow.
Josh,
No, I'm just talking about an average arrow.
If you're going to air, Josh, if you were going to, so let's say somebody's in those specs, and so a 400 is on the weak side, but possible. A 340 is probably dead on what they should be shooting. Would you rather them shoot, if they had to choose between either a 300 or a 400, would you prefer them shoot the 300 over the 400?
Always tunes better in the long run and typically shoots a broadhead better, period.
All right.
Yeah, I found that too. Have you ever fiddled around with 200s and 150s? And why can't we just shoot a freaking stick that's an iron bar that never flexes? And I can't get them to tune.
Because it weighs too much.
No. I'm talking about just aero flight, right? So
Honestly,
why don't we just take the bending out? I tried that.
I've not gone past 250 for most of the time because most of what I'm doesn't need it. Like it'll tune.
Yeah, right. No problem. We fiddled around with that and said, okay, what if we just take the bending rate out? What if we just shoot basically an iron bar, right? Seems like you could just shoot one arrow and be done with it.
Your iron bar is still going to bend when you shoot.
No,
it.
I got that. We found that out.
Troy, did you buy? So Black Eagle makes a 150 spine that I've got.
Yes, yeah, I've got some of the 150s.
Okay, some assist. Okay, all right. So, but you did some slow-mo stuff. Are you doing the slow-mo stuff where you're actually still seeing it bend, or was it a different type of test?
I was just trying to get them.
How do we always talk about arrows? Why are we always not talking about the thing that I thought we were going to talk about when we do this? Why are we talking about arrows?
Wait a second. I was asking about tuning a bow to make it shoot a really soft arrow. That's that's part of the equation.
Maybe I'm leaning back into it then. All right. Okay. All right. Fair. But it would be better to err on the side of stiffer, but being too stiff, you're still going to run into issues. Like I've watched John Dudley where he did a test where he shot underspined, perfect spined, overspined, and his groups at distance were worse with too stiff. And speaking of John Dudley, what a nice segue you made, Brandon McDonald. That was wonderful.
Good job.
Troy, what did you think of that podcast that you did with him?
It was what I expected after talking to him for an hour and a half before that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've talked to him a lot, actually, even after.
It sounded like he was kind of a dick to you, to be honest.
No, it was interesting. How's that? I'm not even trying to be diplomatic. I'm still trying to process it. I don't understand what was going on. So I just went along. You know, it was fine.
No, I know it was. Because I know that you're probably, you know who he is, and I know that you probably respect what he does.
Yeah, sure.
But the air of that interview with you was I didn't like it. I didn't find it to be helpful for you. Did you find it to be helpful?
No. But it is what it is. It's not even because it was John. I guess I gotta throw something out here. People don't understand how much I don't care. If I turned off the goddamn ranch fair tomorrow, I still exist. Seriously, I am not that attached to all this stuff. This is not my personality. I got a whole lot of other stuff going on in the background. 3 kids I'm still raising. Just fixed an ACL on one of my boys, and I fish like crazy. I mean,
you do fish a lot.
I fish a ton. Pretty damn good with a shotgun. Used to carry a single-digit handicap in golf. I've done a lot of stuff, and I got a lot of stuff to do. Currently trying to catch the state record speckled trout, which is 0.000% of the population. But so I just went into that, and it started to go off the rails a little bit.
And
Sometimes you just lean into it. I've been married for 30 years to the same woman. That was nothing. That was nothing. I'll get back on track with MFJJ.
I hold on before we move on. I can't tell you how many people I had message me and say John was not helpful in that interview, and he sounded like an asshole. And I found that super interesting. And probably if I wasn't too Johnny Walker Blues into this, I wouldn't be saying this, because I like John and what he brought to the community, like what he brings in general. Mm-hmm. But listening to that interview of you guys, it sounded like it just wasn't helpful. He was super condescending. I just wasn't impressed.
Well, thank you for your comments. I concur. It was just, whatever.
Would you go up? He offered you shooting lessons.
I would shoot.
Would you go?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's likely to actually happen because he comes to Austin all the time and hangs out at the shop. So
okay, that would be would be sweet. I hope that happens.
I've never been taught to shoot a bow, and I told him that. And one of the things that bothers me about him, he doesn't understand the audience. He does not understand anything about anyone other than him. If I have one negative thing, John Dudley, if you're listening, you need to understand
He's gonna.
customer base. You don't understand your customer. I've been a professional salesperson for 25 years. You're better off trying to figure out how the hell they'll eat the elephant than trying to sell them something. And he does not grasp what the average bow hunter looks like. They get to hunt. If I look at my base, 10 or 12 hunts a year, mostly deer. They've got 2 kids. Those kids are 6 to 14. They've got baseball.
Yeah.
They've got life. They got to pay the damn bills. And that's who's buying all that stuff. That's who's buying my stuff. I'm not selling it to elite people who get to hunt all the time, dick around on gold medal ranches for elk every year and act like they're goddamn superhero. These are people who just are trying to kill one damn deer. In between the baseball game, they got a coach. I was that dude for a decade. I was coaching volleyball and a full-time baseball team. And I got a third kid too. He needs some attention. So that was the biggest, when during that interview, I was just like, God, he doesn't understand anything about anybody that he sells all the stuff to. He's probably one of the, I said this to him. He started rattling off all these names of people I should know. I don't pay attention. And I said, I assume those are the most elite shooters in the world. Yeah. Y'all aren't normal. And he looked at me. And I said, you act like MFJJ, you're going to outshoot me like crazy just because of your form and the stuff you've done and you've focused on this stuff. You've probably shot indoor and all that stuff. I haven't done any of that stuff. I'll admit it. I don't give a hoot in hell. But you can't compare John Dudley to a guy who's a kick-ass real estate guy or an accountant or a brain surgeon, but they're not great with a bow and then just talk down to them. You need to help those people.
Sure, and that's fair. That's fair. That was part of why I had a good interest in having this conversation, and hopefully more. And maybe, you know, if you take me up on what I was offering you when we were talking earlier, I want the people that pay attention to you, that have that life, which is a lot of who I deal with. I want them to want to be able to work on their own bow and find it to be because that's the reality of this. No one's really going to get better if they don't understand that. And I'm trying to the barrier of entry to that really low and put out enough information that they're not afraid.
Yeah, I think you're doing a good job with that. And
for sure, Josh.
That Bowtech bow on one of your videos I saw you fiddling with, you Bowtech boys need to send me one of them damn things. That's awesome. Like being able to adjust it right there on the wheel.
I mean, it's super simple. The newest model, you can adjust the timing, you can adjust the wheeling, you can do everything that I was talking about trying to get it to orientate right. If you have a draw board that you can pull it back with and look at it, you can do all that. And I'm trying as hard as I can, and it'll be more of it. But the tuning part has to be as important as the arrow matching part. But the arrow matching part is super important, and I agree with a lot of what you do. But I also did want to preface and get this out there that I think you probably, I don't know how much hate you experience from people. It seems like this is very polarizing on this topic.
Not a lot.
You don't get a lot. I would like to emphasize that certain applications be prefaced by, hey, if you're going to shoot this far and in, this is what you use. If you're going to shoot past that, don't use this kind of thing. Because I see a ton of people that go the heavy. Days. And those
have you really ought to, do you have a lab radar?
Yeah, I have a lab radar. I've got the new Garmin ones too. I've got all that.
Shoot a 600 grain arrow out to 80 and shoot a 420 grain arrow out to 80 and see what the energy is at the target.
I don't disagree with you that the energy storage is there. Troy, I've killed animals at over 100 yards with really light arrows.
Right.
So it's not an issue as long as you're shooting a decent amount of energy with a decent amount of speed in the bow. But
Trump 2024.
Oh,
yep,
dude, ahead. I've got Epstein didn't kill himself. I've got all sorts of fun stuff in the comments. People are going nuts.
But
but, back to my comment about you're not normal.
No, I don't disagree with you, but I believe wholeheartedly that the average guy, if he's going to shoot past 40 yards for his hunting, he is way better served with a lot lighter arrow.
You're not
Inside,
going to get but this is the thing. You're not going to get Troy to agree to this, though. You're not going to get Troy to say yes to this one. Like, I just
I'm
don't
doing
think
some
you
other
are.
stuff that's really fun on that, and I'll do it later. I'll get back on the bow stuff because I still have questions I want to ask.
All right, let's roll through some questions. I'm sure I'm going to get the text here that baby is crying and I need to go upstairs soon.
Right.
you do it.
Why are 3D bows long and boring?
Why are they long and boring?
Yes.
Because they're designed to be accurate and forgiving.
Why are we not shooting 3D bows for hunting?
I shoot higher axle to axle, and longer brace height bows to hunt with. The issue is speed and energy. And once again, when you get down to your average guy, like we're talking about, I think we can all agree that the majority of people hunt deer out of a tree stand or a ground blind 30 yards and in. Yeah.
Absolutely.
How forgiving a bow is in that scenario is not super relevant. No offense. Like, it's hard to see how inaccurate something is unless you shoot it a long ways away. The variable of difference gets so much smaller at that distance that the average guy can get away with a bow that's less forgiving. He's more concerned about being able to sit this direction and turn around and do that and still get a shot off, right? So you shoot a 38 or 40-inch axle-to-axle bow out of a tree stand from an awkward position. It's really hard. And I never shot short axle-to-axle stuff. And I went tree stand hunted in Minnesota and tried to turn around the backside of a tree and shoot at a deer, and I was like, God damn, I wish I had a shorter bow.
I wish I was shooting a triax right now. Yep.
Short axle to axle bow. So I get it, because inside of 40 yards, right, which is what most of that is, the bow's forgiveness isn't nearly as relevant. Now, if you're Aaron Snyder and you're shooting stuff a long ways away out in the western front and open, it makes a bigger difference. I shoot higher axle to axle, or longer axle to axle, higher brace height bows when I'm shooting open country.
But how tall are you, Josh?
Totally different.
How tall are you again?
6'5".
Okay. So
yeah, you're irrelevant.
Well,
because
that's not fair.
You're too tall. I mean, you're long as shit. You got to. I mean, that's.
But hey, now hold on a second. Hold on a second. That's not a fair statement. That's not a fair statement, because I guarantee you, I have a harder time with my bow not torquing than you do because of the
for sure. That's true.
So if I can shoot a 6-inch brace height, 29-inch axle to axle bow well, it's 10 times easier for you because everything gets amplified. The longer you draw.
No doubt. I get a lot of gorilla arm guys that have trouble.
Speed and energy, but dude, my hand grip has to be perfect, and I learned that when I was young. And I can grab almost anybody's bow and shoot it clean relatively easily because that was the one big factor for me, right? So that's why you see shorter axle to axle bows, is the type of hunting you're doing. If you're open, walking around in the country and whatnot, yeah, it's fine. Use a big bow. Use a big forgiving bow. That's totally fine. I do it. But tree stand, once again, your base, the majority of your people, they're not using that environment, right?
But so then 33, 34 is kind of the happy medium then for accurate and stable and.
Yeah. What I would call your hybrid bow is going to be long riser, longer axle to axle, like 30, 34, 35 in there, and preferably a little more brace height, so it's a little more forgiving. A bow that you would go, I can shoot some tournament with this and not feel like I'm at a big disadvantage, but I can still, and it's not this big, gaudy, awkward thing. Majority of what I'm with is a 33, 34, 35. But when I'm in tree stands and ground blinds, I'm back to a little guy because it's just easy.
I noticed it right off the bat. I've got one that's 29. I've got one that's, well, that's what they state. I saw your video. So we'll just go with what the manufacturer state. And I've got one that's 31 that's pretty stable. And then when I got the Remedy at 33, it was just like, I mean, you kind of can't do any wrong. I mean, it's real forgiving. It's not 9 million miles an hour. It's fast, but it's not stupid.
And Josh,
right.
But Josh, do you feel like, I don't know the Remedy that well, do you feel like that's axle to axle or the reflex or the brace height or just the combination of all that?
See?
Okay.
Elite tries to make straighter riser bows. They still have some reflex in them. As long as a bow doesn't get up to the 3s, it's usually relatively forgiving. If you can get it under the 1s, it's damn near hard to miss with in a hand torque position, right?
Yeah.
But in an inch and 2 inches, anywhere in there, it's going to be relatively shootable. It really is. You start getting beyond the 2s, and it starts to be a little more finicky. You get beyond 3, and it's a lot more finicky. Like
mine's like 1 3/4 inches. It's short. Like, I put the shaft on the limb pockets and ran the tape across it. And just one more reason. I know it does it, but I want to know why it does it, right?
And Josh, define reflex real quick, because I think that you're unique to making this measurement known right now.
That's crazy. I've never seen that.
Yeah.
Right. So reflex geometry is the distance the handle is placed behind the pivot point in the bow. And the pivot point in the bow is where the limb and the limb pocket meet, top to bottom, in a straight line. So however far behind that line is reflex geometry. However far in front of that line is deflex geometry. Any bow engineer knows this stuff. This is rocket science, okay? And you look at target bows, and target bows have almost no reflex. In some instances, deflex. The new PSE Super X that Bodie Turner's winning the tournaments with so far, it's a deflex riser design. It wouldn't do that.
The grip is literally behind where the limb pocket, basically where the limb pockets are coming down.
So the limb pockets are back here, right? Most bows, the limb pockets are up here.
Yeah.
It's like that. Why? Because it's more for
like this. It's a triangle that you're moving around.
It's harder.
It's fascinating.
It's simple.
Right.
It's obvious. Like, you can make hand mistakes and they don't cause you to miss by as much. Anytime you move those points farther apart, when you torque, you're moving and amplifying at a greater margin.
Makes sense.
When you torque, you miss by more. Period.
Yeah.
All right.
So
when you torque,
Ranch, what else you got? Troy, what else you got?
When you torque the bow, the string doesn't follow your hand, is what you're saying. The limb's bending, the limb is moving.
Watch
your hand's staying here.
Your bow back next time when you can. Drop back and get everything. Look right, look up at it, and then turn your hand left or turn your hand right. You'll see the sides of the cams on either side. When you fire that string's trying to still go on that path, and then it close and it jumps back into the cam, and the ass end of the arrow kicks over. That's where it's coming from. Once again, if you could hold your bow at that angle and pitch your cams and everything to where it's straight, you could get that in a straight line. But when you manipulate your hand, you're taking something that was in a straight line and taking it out of a straight line, causing you to miss by more.
So the other issue is when you have a sight on a dovetail that you've run way out from the bow. Now you're exacerbating that problem because you're torquing the bow, and this is something that when I was watching Josh's videos. Correct. And the further out it is, the more it's moving.
Go back.
Like parallax in a scope.
Troy, go back and watch Bill's sights suck for bow hunting. That was a hot little video I made like a year and a half ago.
I bet people loved you for that.
Simple as that.
Easy V, man.
Yeah.
Fixes everything.
Easy V.
The meat axe. That thing is awesome. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. That thing for hunting is a meat axe. I'm telling you.
Oh my God.
Again,
pouring another drink.
In the right application,
right?
You're not wrong, but it's got to be in the right application.
Absolutely. That's a 40-yard sight.
I know. Like San Antonio Total Archery Challenge. San Antonio Total Archery Challenge. All of us together. Tack. Troy's going to shoot the Easy V.
I can't do that to 100. I know that for a fact. I'll have to have a drop. I'll put a dropper on the bottom. It'll be like a little stick, like a upside down peep sight. And I'll just hold it like that.
We'll just get you a popsicle stick, and we'll stick a sight tape to there, and you can just raise it up.
And I'll just kind of go like that with 2 peeps. Be drawing up here. I mean, it'll be awesome.
This is a good idea. I like
down here.
Yeah.
I can break some crap. I'll definitely miss and break some crap. Skip it all over the place. Do you recommend if somebody's going to shoot 3D in hunting, do you just tell them, you set them up and then tell them to go so that they're shooting the same stuff, or is that an individual choice?
It depends on how serious they're taking it, honestly. If they're shooting 3D to practice for hunting, build a hunting don't dick with it, and shoot what you would hunt with.
I like
If
that.
you 3D, yeah, you probably want a much lighter arrow because the flatter your trajectory, the easier everything is. It just helps. In that scenario, I'm not talking about energy or penetration not mattering, right?
Yeah.
A lighter arrow has so many massive benefits to that scenario. Part of why I tend to gravitate to the light side of what I think is okay. But if they're not taking the 3D portion serious, you're way better suited to use the same exact thing you're going to hunt with, because your drop and everything is going to become so much more familiar to you. You're going to look at a shot situation in a hunting situation and go, I know that stick's in the way because I know how high my arrow goes. And when you don't get the opportunity to get those reps with the actual hunting equipment, you're doing yourself a bit of disservice if hunting is really your goal. If you want to be competitive, you got to use competitive equipment. If you don't really care about being competitive, practice hunting. And for that matter, probably don't pay attention to where the dots are on the target. There's probably a better place to aim.
Absolutely. 3D messes with a lot of people for the shot placement stuff somewhat. Shooting it kind of a big part.
I blame my 3D targets when I miss all the time too. I'm like, that would have been a 12 ring on.
I've taken two guys who've won like state championships for 3D, and at 17 yards, they go 0 for 3.
Wow.
These are guys who can shoot. They've got belt buckles to say, I won New Mexico State Championship. 0 for 3 because the arrow's in the wrong place.
Yeah, they're not pointing in the right spot.
Well, that's one of the interesting parts about the pigs is their kill zones are so small.
They're very forward.
You really have to shoot them where you have to shoot them. Or you can just gut shoot a lot of them. And these guys are shooting 3 inches behind the crease, and I just look at it on video and go, I would just go back to the house. I mean, they ain't finding that damn thing. But I digress.
Yeah, stop doing that. Stop
doing that, Troy.
No, like I said, honestly, Troy, if I was coming down and hunting with you and where you're hunting, I would probably do something very similar because I know I'm going to shoot a pig in the scat. You're going to have to because that's where your vitals are. A little different than other critters. But in that scenario, yeah, absolutely. Pound through.
Well, that was the one. That was the most revealing thing. One of the first revealing things. Back to the edge quality thing we talked about earlier. They're covered in mud. Their hair is horrible. I mean, just cleaning one eats knives alive, right? Yeah. The shield really isn't that big a deal. People get a little wound up about the shield. It is a barrier to blood trails because it doesn't want to come apart.
That makes sense.
But it's not hard to penetrate. It's like bulletproof vests stop bullets. They don't stop knives.
No,
it's just like that. Right. It's just like that.
Yeah.
But I really do think I lost a bunch of them when I started because my broadheads were dulling on impact.
Sure. I agree.
And they go further. Right. And then once I learned to sharpen it and get some good steel, I started whacking the piss out of them.
Super huge. I've been working on something to test like broadhead penetration uniformly. I think I've almost got it figured out. And I guarantee the sharper blade retention will really show you a massive difference in those things because that's huge.
I think I'm going to try to kill 5 or 6 of them and just hang hides over a rope. That's what Ed did with the buffaloes when he was testing edge sharpness. He took the skins and hung like 7 skins over a rope and then just shot different edges into them. And he said it was a pretty good target for that. Is a bow and arrow tuned if a fixed blade won't fly, but a mechanical will?
No, not at all. Not even close. If you bow is not tuned until your field point and your fixed blade broadhead hit in the same spot.
At what distance?
Anything up to 70.
Okay, there you go.
Why 70?
Well, it depends on how fast you're shooting, Troy. The faster you're shooting, typically the farther you'll get before they start to separate. And it's because of drag. The broadhead has more drag than the field point does. Even in mechanicals, you'll still see this. They'll try to claim it's not there. You'll see it a little farther out.
You know this.
100%. Like
nobody knows that.
Troy, I sight in bows out to 200 yards with broadheads. Trust me. What it does,
but nobit's knows why. It's
drag.
They just think,
it's drag.
It's
drag. And like
lift, but
points that create drag that help with that, so they'll get closer. But if you're 70 yards and in, your broadhead and field point should hit in the same spot, period. If it's hitting lower at like 40 or 50, it's not tuned. That's not drag. Drag doesn't really really start to show until like 70 or beyond, depending on how fast your bow is.
I've been talking to a couple of friends of mine who are very long-range rifle guys.
Yeah.
And I have been assured that 800 is the magic number with a rifle where things get crazy. And I'm going to start digging into that.
So a lot of that depends on, I do long-range rifle stuff too, part of why I like long-range archery stuff. And the bullet, the ballistics, how big a bullet, type of weapon.
So it sounds like 70 is our 700 or is our 800.
Once again, it's what you're building. But yeah, I wouldn't disagree. Like beyond 70, it starts to separate. And you can still just sight in your broadhead because it'll still be consistent. It's not like a bullet at a certain point where it starts to wobble and not follow its track. It'll always still follow its track. Like you can shoot that thing as far as point it, and you can still do it consistently. It won't, the group won't like drastically open up. It still follow its path if you've gone through and Nock orientated everything to where they're all bending exactly the same way out of the bow.
Have you I've had a couple of folks send me videos. I had my neighbor had it happen where at like 50 it looks like the arrow destabilizes. Like it in slow-mo it looks like it's and then all of a sudden no wind. I'm not talking about something adverse. Right? Just shooting out that on a decent day, and all of a sudden the damn thing destabilizes.
Parachute.
And we're not talking. I don't know. I haven't figured that out.
Dan Staten, elk shape parachute.
Right. Oh
yeah. So that's a combination of things in most instances. If you're seeing it looks like it's doing this,
but it's downrange. Like it launches nice.
Yeah. And launch it looks good, but
then all of a sudden
it's excessive.
It just decides, to hell with this crap. It's spinning out, bro.
Excessive and or excessive amount of twist, excessive drag. Certain types of vanes do it, certain ones don't. And I've got the cleanest flight I've ever gotten at distance on film now with certain things that I'm using and playing with. But certain ones create more and certain ones don't. And if you see that, you either have not enough fletch or way too much fletch.
Not enough fletch could be part of it. That's interesting.
Yeah, because I've seen it with I've been playing with little 2.3s for shooting mechanicals at distance, and I couldn't get rid of it with a couple of the 2-inch and the 2.3s, but other ones were fine. So and I think anything it's not length, it's profile height, right? So if it doesn't have enough profile height, it'll still wobble because it's just losing control no matter what.
That's interesting.
The rocket community says go tall before you go long.
100%.
On vanes, on the fins is what they shoot right on rockets going really fast. But
what would they know?
What would they know? Right?
What would they know?
I get a kick out of somebody sent me the international meeting for rocketry. They have it every year, and all these guys run out there and shoot rockets. PhDs from MIT, right? All these people are super brainiacs. We've got a bunch of idiots like me shooting pigs at 15 yards and the guys who can blow turkey calls telling us how to fly arrows. It's freaking awesome. I mean, the list was crazy. Bachelor laureate was 17 freaking letters behind his name in aerodynamics at the, rocket guy thing. And here we are trying to figure this stuff out.
Ranch Ferry.
Yeah, Ranch Ferry.
MIT Ranch Ferry. Yep. I like it.
The most expensive education to learn to gut pigs on the planet. And nobody's looking at.
Yeah.
All right. I'm out of questions.
All right, let me see. I have.
He froze up.
Brandon.
Brandon. That alcohol took over.
Now, I clicked off to go. I clicked off to go look at my notes. I am as of now. I'm inadequately served. I'm not overserved. Yeah. So if somebody comes into the shop, Josh, and they are shooting, and you're shooting them through paper, and you're just realizing, listen, you're brand new. This is going to take you. You just need to go get reps in before you come back. when do you let them go and actually say you should probably not hunt until you can get your paper tear down to X? Or is that even a thing that you say?
Traditionally, what I'll do is if I hand it to them and it looks like a donkey, I'll pick it up and shoot it for them so they see that it's clean and say, okay, now let's watch what you're doing that's helping to create this, because what you're doing in your hand or how hard you're pushing into your face is creating this manipulation. But you first have to prove to them that it's actually straight.
Okay.
So they don't, guy doesn't know what he's doing, that kind of thing, right? And then you can I'll literally like grab their hand and maneuver a hand around or walk up and say, okay, keep your finger off the trigger, and I'll fire it for them. So they can back to it, right? And say, look, you just got a clean tear. That's your hand. That's your
Get the hell out of my shop.
Yeah, right. You're the worst person ever.
Figure this out. You need to go home and make a paper tuner and stand in front of that paper till you get a clean tear through paper.
Yeah.
Because this is you physically causing it. And I'll try to show them what they're doing that causes it. And one of the things that I'll explain to help them see it is just like I was talking with you, Troy, about anchoring it back and looking up at the cams. If your cams are straight, which typically any boat leaves our shop, the cams are straight, you should be able to anchor in, look up the string, and not be able to see the left or the right of the cam. It should look straight.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever done that.
If you're torquing your bow, you'll see the left or right of the cam. If you're not, it's straight. Now, as long as you're not gripping it or squeezing it when you fire it, it'll shoot straight out of your hand. So anchor in, get settled, look up, and move your hand until that looks straight, and then squeeze it off.
So you could stand behind somebody and help them with that.
100%.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Good.
And if you teach them,
I will be borrowing that pro tip.
if you teach them how to see it, they can do it themselves.
Yeah,
it's like
no. Right.
I want people to be able to identify it themselves, not need somebody.
So I get we have a huge family, and I get randos coming in all the time, and they've got whatever was given to them, and then they shoot their first arrow, and I just go, whew, that's kind of sideways, bro. And they're like, they're flying good. I'm like, oh, God. And that's what they've gotten used to seeing.
Right.
It kind of sucks, right? They got used to seeing a certain launch, and then it hits on target, right, in quotes. And then they think, it's fine. And it's tough. Those are little tips I can mess with. I can work with people that aren't going to boggle their damn mind and change their golf swing, right? But it's pretty simple. Stand behind them and go, I need to go like that. Okay, try that, right? And get to shoot straighter.
A lot of the OG guys that I've noticed, they have a lot of face pressure. Like they like to use kisser buttons and they just dig in. It's I don't know how they get inconsistency at all.
Doing it the exact same way, it's consistent and duplicatable.
Sure.
Do it completely wrong if you can do it the same.
Right.
At the end of the day, you're simply trying to duplicate. What I teach is the easiest way to duplicate. Do it however you like if you can do it the same.
I like it.
Do you think
think
people are pretty consistent, or do you think are the people that you work with all over the place, like their grip pressure changes all the time? They're people that shoot a lot. I'm not talking about a newbie. You got to cut them some slack, right? They don't even know what the hell's going on. But so let's say somebody's been shooting for a year, got a couple of deer under their belt, right?
It depends on if they understand it, Troy. Like if they understand how to hold a bow correctly and they shoot a lot, they should be good. If you don't have a clue how to hold a bow correctly, it's like 50-50 whether or not you're consistent. Because if you grab that thing differently, like if you take an open hand and then touch one finger to the front of that thing, it's going to change the way it tunes and tears.
I'm going to play with that.
You can't do it. You got to do it the same every time. There's just.
Do you think people develop? I mean, do you see people who are really like you could stand by them and go, God dang, man, the last 3 shots were all different because of them.
Yeah, 100%. Now, so there's some easy guidelines, Troy. So when you're working with somebody, right? If somebody's group looks like this, it's hand grip. If somebody's group like this, it's your peak position. You're coming out.
Oh, that's
no kidding.
If your group looks up and down, this is assuming a tuned bow.
Yeah, right.
Right? Untuned,
Let's just
different discussion.
Aside. Right. Yeah, right.
Tuned bow. If your group looks like this, pay attention to your peep sight. If your group looks like this, pay attention to your hand grip.
Why does the peep sight make it a vertical disparity?
A peep's position, right? You anchor into your position. You look at your, you frame your front housing with your peep, and then you start looking down there and you stop looking back here. If it's in the wrong spot, as you're sitting there pulling or pointing, you'll either come up out of it or down into it more based off of your head being in the wrong position, which will give you an up and down impact position. That's why your group looks up and down.
But why would
Pay attention.
they change? Why would they change? Trying to understand if I was doing that, I don't shoot a peep because I shoot in the dark so much that it's just not, it's impractical. They're hard
Sure.
to see through. But I just shoot a kisser button and touch the string on my nose and it's close, right? So it doesn't matter. But why would they constantly change their face position to get into something that's fixed in the string?
Peep's in the wrong spot to begin with. So like,
okay,
your body's naturally going to sit at a given position.
Mm-hmm.
You rotate over, you set your tip of your nose on the string, your head's naturally going to sit up like this. Well, if your peep's too low, you're going to push your face into it to line up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you stop looking at the alignment and start looking down there, your head's going to slowly come up and 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 up to where it wants to naturally sit. Same thing with your peep being too high. You're going to bring your head up, look through it, anchor everything up, start aiming with your pin, and it's slowly going to just come down, 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 down.
Oh,
down.
you're saying that they want to put their head in a position no matter what. They look in the peep,
You're going
and
to
then their head goes back to some position that's comfortable.
Yeah, you're going to naturally sit in a given position.
Oh,
You're going
that's
to line
golden.
try to go back to that position naturally without thinking about it subconsciously.
And Josh, that's one of the reasons you tell people to sight in at 60, right?
Yep.
Sight in where?
So yeah, like it's, well, it depends on how far you want to shoot, Troy. If you want to shoot out to like 80, 90 yards at some point, you probably ought to set your peep position at like 60 yards because you're moving it up and down, or you're centering on a pin that's in a different spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot easier to hold a consistent position at 20 yards pushing into your string than it is to be at like 90 yards and not even touching your nose anymore because you've lifted your head up to look through your peep.
Mm-hmm.
So you try to set it to the middle or a little beyond the middle of the range you want to shoot. So it's most consistent so your head creeps out of it the least amount.
So, another question. Now I'm spinning. So it's good stuff. So if I'm shooting a 30-inch shorter bow,
yeah,
should I increase my draw length like half an inch so I can get back to the peep, or should I mean, is that how you set those up? I just thought about this because my longer bow, my Remedy, it's real, it's real vertical. So it's just like, doink, it's right there. But my shorter bow, my cure is shorter, and it seems like I need to, like I'm having to go get the peep, You're
going to want to use as short of a nose of release as you possibly can and as short a loop as you possibly can so your head sits in a more upright position with your hand in the same position. If you shorten the distance of what's here on a shorter axle to axle bow, your head will come up a little more and feel a little more normal. And you get into a longer bow, you can lengthen these out and your head comes back down to a more natural position. So it's all really critical when you're setting it to begin with, which is why a good shot makes a big difference. They can hopefully identify where your peep really belongs, that you're good and solid. But if this ends up being too long or too short, it throws everything off a ton.
Yeah,
which is why
I've experienced that. I had my bow set at 29 and a half at one time, and it just felt like I was way, like I was pulling like I was way back. It's uncomfortable.
Or anything, Troy, it's way more important. If you don't get, I can't give you the angle right here, but there's a point when you draw a bow back where if you were to stand in front of that arrow and look back at it, it'd go through your elbow if it was set just right. So as you try to push forward and pull back to fire the bow, it's in a straight line. If it's in a straight line when you're pointing, it doesn't move. If it's a little back here, it does this. It's a little that. Perfectly straight line, it doesn't move. So you can't manipulate your draw length to try to make a face position feel better. It doesn't work, right? You just try to get these distances as short as possible so your head's in a little more upright position.
Yeah, that just came out of nowhere because I was just like, well, so the string angle, you kind of want your peep back. I didn't know if that was a thing. All right, Brandon?
The peep thing was one of the things that I, like, when I shot the Triax 28-inch axle to axle bow one year, it was a disaster for me until I figured out the exact height for the peep, and then I felt comfortable. Like, I think that I'd set it at the shop, and this is what I think a lot of people do. They'll go to the shop and they'll set it, and they're aiming like down at a target on the ground.
Mhm.
And then they'll, you know, like, I'm not talking about Josh's shop. Surely you wouldn't do that. But they'll set the peep at 7 yards, tie the thing in, out the door, and shoot that forever. And they're always suffering on the accuracy front because they're never comfortable with the position of the peep.
Right.
And when I realized that, like teaching people to cut all the serving off the peep and just move that bitch up and down, an eighth of an inch up and an eighth of an inch down, and just getting people like dialed in on the peep. To me, that's a video that I want to make this year. It seems so stupid. It seems so stupid, but it makes a massive difference on accuracy.
It won't,
in my opinion.
I guess it won't fly out in a few shots.
It depends.
Right? You can leave it untied.
It depends on the bow.
You can always, it's true. How much in the string will have a lot to do with whether or not a peep stays in it or not. But you can always do a couple of soft knots above and below the peep and cut it right back out later. But you can put it down and not
ties,
have
maybe.
Was that?
Put zip ties on there.
I don't know.
No?
Might be able.
No, just go on podiumarcher.com and order some serving material for cheap, and then learn how to tie in a peep, because it's not hard at all. And then you're never afraid to cut it, and order some D-loop material while you're at it. Yeah. And learn how to cut it off, learn how to redo a D-loop, and learn how to do your peep, because it's super easy. It literally is like basic Boy Scout bitch stuff. If you can it's super easy, and it will make a huge difference. And yeah, you may have to go back into the shop. If you decide that you're going to push your peep a half an inch up on the string, you're going to have to go back in, because it's going to rotate, unless you got a Hoyt and you got like those little, slider thingies.
Or you're not going to get it out with that. If it's more quarter turn, you're not getting it out without a bow press.
Okay.
What's the
All right.
why do the peeps get out of whack?
It's usually twisting. So if your serving separates in a cam groove, it changes the effective length and allows the peep to turn a little bit. But 9 times out of 10, it's actually your D loop's not tied correctly and tight on the serving, and it's shifting around, and it makes it look like the peep's actually moving. That's not what's actually moving. It's the loop itself. So if your center serving's tied really good and the guy who installed your loop did a really good job installing it, it won't move. If it's tied,
if the string is somebody just said, Joe there just said string stretch. Is that a part of it, or?
Yep. Yeah, string stretch will cause it to move a little bit too, but more often than not, I'll see a guy's D loop moving out of orientation with his peep. And that's also like as you're serving on your center serving that you attach to all the time, starts to get smaller because you're putting your arrow on and off and on and off and on and off. The loop starts to get movable, and it starts to roll a little left or a little right, and it looks like the peep's doing it, but it's actually the loop more often than it is.
I've seen that now that I've paid attention to it on some videos I've watched. You see, that's the first thing people do. It's just part of the shot cycle.
Yeah.
You just see them reach up and go, and they.
Yeah, you should.
I do it. I still out of habit. Like the video of me shooting my stag in New Zealand starts with me going and just getting my peep. Like, here we go.
Brandon.
Hey.
Yeah, Ruben, I don't run a peep because I shoot at night a lot.
Damn it, Brandon.
hey, Matthew's zebra strings. Strings.
Match strings are awesome.
I'm impressed so far, my friend. The lift is very impressive. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Well, guys, I wish the last 15 minutes of the shit that we talked about was pushed further up in the video, but this has been great. We need to let go. Hey, if you're still here, there's 311 people still here. If you're not following me on Instagram and YouTube, you need to go follow me. You're definitely following these other two guys already.
Don't follow Brandon.
I'm way behind the pack. Come on.
Nah.
Obviously, they should
Brandon.
be following everybody, and you should be buying stuff. Buy stuff from Troy. Buy stuff from Josh. Go do all the things.
Sell some real estate cheap to freaking Brandon, and everything will be fine.
If you live in Middle Tennessee and you need a hard money loan, call me. I will give you. I'm your
Well,
yeah.
we need to pimp. We're good.
Exactly.
Out, bro. Pimp it out.
Exactly. All right. Anything else you guys want to talk about before we go?
No. Now I've got all kind of stuff rolling around my head. We have to do this again because
we're going to have to go through. So, Troy, what's going to blow your mind is Josh can tell you, based on your misses, what's going on with your setup without even seeing it. Like it's like that scene in what was that bowling movie where Woody Harrelson tells the guy to screw over a couple of boards? Kingpin. Yeah. Josh is the Woody Harrelson of the archery world. One missing a hand, going down on dirty old ladies for rent money.
Hey, you just got a follower, Brandon. I just saw somebody started following you. Hey, $20 is $20, Brandon.
Right. Guys, I enjoyed it thoroughly. All right,
thanks
we'll talk later.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
That'll be good.
Absolutely. See you guys.